The year is 1991, Christmas Day to be exact, and it was also the day I received a Super Nintendo from my parents. Hot damn, I was one happy kid. Of course, the system was bundled with the new Super Mario World, but kid me was way more interested in this other game I got, which was ActRaiser. The box instantly grabbed my attention. The front had this awesome image of lightning striking some pyramids, while the back had pictures of the action stages, and man did they look amazing. I could hardly wait to play this game, so as soon as I hooked up my new SNES, the first thing I did was pop this game in, and I promptly had my 7-year-old mind blown away. You see kids, the 16-bit era was truly the beginning of a gaming renaissance in my opinion. Before, we had great games like Super Mario Bros., Mega Man, and DuckTales, just to name a few, which were fantastic games in their own right, but always limited by the hardware they played on. Don't get me wrong, the NES was a technical marvel for its time, but when the 16-bit generation came out, it took gaming to a whole other level. The graphics, the sound, everything was drastically improved, which, like I said earlier, blew me away. ActRaiser is a perfect example of this. As soon as you turn the game on, bam! That music just hits you and you instantly know you're in for something special, and that's just the beginning. So here's the setup. A few hundred years ago, a being named Tanzra, known as the Evil One, gathered his 6 guardians and attacked you, the Master, because he wanted to rule the world. After a battle that lasted several days and nights, the Master retreated back to his sky palace and erected a barrier to protect himself while he waited for his injuries to heal. Unfortunately, he fell into a deep coma for hundreds of years, which allowed Tanzra to conquer the world and divide it up into 6 lands for each of his guardians to rule. When the Master awoke hundreds of years later, he realized that while he was completely healed, he didn't have any of his previous powers because all of his followers were gone. We begin the game as he sets off to rid the world of the Evil One, as well as return peace and order to the world. ActRaiser, developed by Quintet and published by Enix, has 2 different gameplay styles. First off, we have the side-scrolling platform sections where you control the Master and fight through all the monsters in a particular area leading up to a boss fight. These bookend each sim mode, as the game likes to call it. The sim mode is basically SimCity sections where you seal away monster layers and partake in the urban development of each town. In these sections, you control the Master's angel and you help the people build and grow as a society. This in turn helps to make the Master stronger either by increasing his health, magic points, or giving him different magic spells that he can use in the action stages, all of which are great to have later in the game. Sim mode is where you're going to be spending the bulk of your time playing this game. You start these sections by directing your followers to each area containing a monster's lair. Along the way, they'll build their town according to your direction and eventually seal the lair. You'll also be listening to quite a few prayers of the people and helping them solve their problems as the game progresses. The monsters in each area vary in difficulty depending on where you're at. Some can be taken out with just a single arrow from the angel, while others take around 8 to go down. Each monster has its own unique attacks as well. The bats will try to abduct your followers, while the blue dragons will summon lightning to destroy their houses, and the giant skulls can cause earthquakes that devastate your town. Lastly is the red demon, which likes to kill the crops in the town, but they can be brought back to life with a simple rainstorm. I guess this is a good time to mention the miracles. These are actions that you can do in sim mode that have effects on the terrain. You need a certain amount of SP, this game's magic points, to perform these miracles. There's the lightning, which clears away forests and rock, the aforementioned rain, which can clear away sand and reinvigorate crops, the sun, which naturally dries up wetlands, the wind, which can power windmills as well as clear all visible monsters off the screen, and finally, earthquakes that can alter the terrain and are essential for rebuilding certain areas to help the Master reach his full strength. Each town will have its own set of obstacles you'll have to clear through, whether it be clearing the terrain so that people can build as well as reach the layers that need to be sealed, or rescuing a person or a group of people that need help. You hear these problems by listening to the people's prayers and receive offerings by solving them. The people of Fillmore, for instance, will learn how to build bridges, and you'll need to teach this ability to the town of Bloodpool. The leaders of this town have a child named Teddy that runs away from home, and you'll need to deliver him some bread you received to get him to return home. In the town of Cassandora, you're charged with leading the town to people lost in the desert. When you find them, you'll receive the music, which you'll have to take back to Bloodpool to calm the fighting that's erupted in the town. You also receive a stone tablet from Cassandora that you'll use in the town of Marana to cause them to investigate the Bird Island to find a magic spell for the Master. From Marana, you'll take an herb back to Cassandora to cure an illness that has spread throughout the town. The town of Atos is nestled up to a volcano that eventually erupts and you'll have to save them. From here, you'll take Sheep's Fleece to Northwall, which protects the people from the frigid cold. Northwall is a land covered in snow and you'll need to melt said snow in order to build on the land. Most of these tasks are simple enough, so clearing through them shouldn't be much of an issue. So the action stages are how you start and finish each town basically. These are usually 2 to 3 minute sections where you'll be controlling the Master and fighting through various enemies, eventually making your way to the boss and defeating them. None of the enemies are all that hard. Most of them will go down with a sword strike or two. The Act 1 bosses are obviously a little more challenging, but they are easier than the Act 2 bosses in most cases. For Act 1 in Fillmore, you'll fight the Centaur Knight, who is a very easy first boss, and you finish Act 2 with the Minotaurus, who likes to throw his axe. Bloodpool pits you against the Manticore in Act 1, who just jumps and shoots fireballs, and in Act 2 you'll fight the Wizard, who halfway through turns into a Wolfman. When you get to Cassandora, you'll have to take on Dagoba, who likes to hide under the sand in Act 1, and you finish Act 2 off against Pharaoh, who goes down pretty quickly. Atos sees you slay a serpent dragon before cave diving in a volcano to defeat the Fire Wheel. In Marana, you'll need a weed whacker to clear out the rough slasher before getting down to business with Kalia, who loves spikes. Finally in Northwall, it's a match with the Mermanfly, who does exactly what his name implies, then a battle with the Arctic Wyvern, who is one of the most challenging bosses in the game if you don't use magic. Some of these bosses can give you a hard time, but once you get their patterns down, you shouldn't have any problems taking them out. Speaking of magic, the 4 spells you have are Fire, which blasts, fire in both directions, a Stardust that causes meteorites to fall from the sky, an Aura spell that releases blue spheres outward around the Master, and a magical light that summons a pillar of purifying light from the Sky Palace that does better against minor enemies than it does against bosses. Arguably, the Stardust and Aura spells are the best 2 in the game, though I tend to prefer the Aura spell because it does better in close combat, which is how you'll spend most of the game. ActRaiser took full advantage of the SNES hardware. Graphically, the game looked great in 1991, and I feel it really holds up well today. All the stages have a good amount of detail, and the sprites still look great. On some stages, the colors and backgrounds really stand out too. The controls are nice and responsive for the most part, and the button layout works well with the SNES controller. My only real complaint is that the Master can seem a bit stiff at times, but ultimately if I die, it's usually my fault. The sound and music are where this game really shines though, especially the music. I love the sound effects in this game, and some of these songs are such earworms that you'll find yourself humming them for days. Some of these songs have actually stuck with me for 30 plus years since I first played the game. They're that good. ActRaiser is also a relatively short game, clocking in at only a few hours to complete. One of the reasons it doesn't take that long is because the game isn't really all that difficult. As long as you're building up your towns, you grow the Master's strength enough to clear through most of the game. The difficulty, however, does spike when you get to Deathheim, the final area. There's no sim mode here. You simply have a boss rush before the final confrontation with Tanzra. Ah yes, the classic boss rush. The point in a game where you have to clear through a certain number of bosses with no breaks in between. ActRaiser goes a little bit further by not giving you any restorative items in between each fight too. Here, you have to once again clear through all of the Act 2 bosses, who are a little faster this time around before jumping straight into the fight with Tanzra. The fight with Tanzra has 2 stages. The first sees you battling Tanzra's floating head while you dodge his blue orbs and the meteorites he calls down. The second is against his true form, and he only has 3 attacks, though they can be tough to avoid until you learn his pattern. After you're able to whittle down Tanzra's massive health bar, you've beaten the game. The end of the game has you going from town to town with the Angel, checking in on the people one last time as he narrates their story and contemplates what the future holds for them, as well as himself and the Master. It's a fitting end to a game, and one that I always look forward to when I play it again. It really gives you a sense of completion. ActRaiser is a great experience from start to finish. It's easy to pick up, always fun to play through, and it's a game that I can always come back to for some of that nostalgic goodness. While it may not be as pretty as the day it came out, it's still a model example of what the SNES was capable of. But hey, if you don't want to wear the nostalgia goggles, Square Enix recently re-released ActRaiser, updating the game entirely. I haven't played that one yet, so I can't vouch for it, but I'll definitely pick it up sometime and give it a whirl. Well, I've said everything I have to say. If you have the chance, grab yourself a copy of ActRaiser and give it a try. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. If you like what you saw, hit the subscribe button and don't forget to like the video. If you've played ActRaiser, heck, let me know what you think about it in the comments. Thank you again so much for watching. We'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.